Welcome, everyone, to Food Addiction 101. I'm Tosca Lindberg. We have Karen Gormley here, and we are going to run through the basics of food addiction, the disease, and the treatment of food addiction. Tonight, hopefully, we're going to do that in about an hour. Here are the things we're going to cover. We are going to do some introductions. Both Karen and I are going to share our stories a little bit. We're going to look at the disease concept of addiction, particularly food addiction. And then we're going to look at the symptoms of addiction and the stages of food addiction. And then we'll take a look at treatment options and what you guys can do if you do indeed suffer from food addiction. What are some things you can do to get well? So we're going to jump in with some pictures of Karen, and I'm going to let you take it away, Karen.
Yeah, there's me when my hair was brown. Well, actually, in some of them, it just looked brown. It wasn't really brown. Yeah, so my name's Karen, and I consider myself a food addict, which means that there are some foods that I cannot safely eat. When I eat them, I want to eat more of them. I'm also a compulsive eater. I think I kind of think that maybe my food addiction started as eating over emotions. And I also consider myself a volume addict. One of the things that, from childhood was that I ate a lot. I ate a lot more than other people did. Yeah, and so I was actually a normie in terms of a normal sized child growing up. And I think that probably had to do with the fact that my mother was really big on nutrition. We didn't have a lot of access to junk food. There wasn't as much fast food around when I was a kid, and we certainly didn't get a lot of it in the house. And, so I went through grade school, high school, and college, in, a body, relatively like the one you see there in the middle, or even on the picture with those stones in the back, without any, I didn't have to diet. I didn't have to worry about my weight. I didn't even have to exercise. And then from the time I graduated college and entered the workforce till the time I was about 46, I just got on the treadmill of gaining weight, dieting to lose the weight, losing the weight, sometimes losing more weight than I needed to lose so I could have a little margin to gain some back. And by the time I was 46 years old, I was 183 pounds, which is the picture on the far left is me probably around that weight. I'm 5'2". And the good news was at that age, I found OA. I went to an OA meeting that was pretty structured, and I found a sponsor. And over the course of about a year, I lost, or maybe less than a year, I lost 60 pounds. And my life changed in so many ways, not just because the weight was off and I was physically better, but working the principles of a 12-step program actually brought me some spiritual, emotional, and mental relief, and also the ability to reach out and get help from medical professionals for what was going on with me from a psychological point of view, which was depression, mostly depression. And I was abstinent for 7 years and doing really well. And a lot of things changed. I was advancing in my work. I was more focused. And at one point, I decided that I probably wasn't really a food addict, because I probably wouldn't have done as well in OA as I did if I was really a food addict. So I decided to expand my food selections. And that was the start of a 5-year relapse, in which I gained, of course, all the weight back and then some more. So at the end of that 5-year relapse, I discovered what is now called Shift. It was then called Acorn. And I signed myself up for the intensive program. And over the course of the intensive program, which at that time was about a week, I became abstinent and relearned how to weigh and measure my meals, did the process work, and I left that intensive abstinently, and I went forward from then on to rejoin OA and to keep my abstinence. And I had a full-time job then, and so I didn't go back to Shift till a little more than a year after my first intensive, and it was because I had been laid off from work and basically retired early, and I decided that I wanted to go back. And I wanted to learn about food addiction by taking that professional program, because I had learned stuff about myself, about this disease, that I had never heard anywhere else. And I just wanted to learn more. And so now here I am, 7 years on from graduating from Shifts intensive, still abstinent, and still gratefully in recovery, and just happy to be here tonight with you. And
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for sharing that. So Karen is another coach. I'm a coach also at Shift, and here are some pictures of me. When I was young, I relate to Karen. I was pretty normal sized when I was young. Took me a long time to catch up, but I don't relate with you with this. In my story, even though as a youngster I was normal sized body, I believe I was born a food addict, and I have very early memories of just, my substance addiction is very much a substance addiction. It's I climbed on the counter of or the bathroom sink, and got in the medicine cabinet when I was very tiny, and got the cough syrup and drank the whole thing. And I just because it was sweet. And it's funny, so now that I'm in recovery, I tell that story, and I told my sister that I was telling that story, and she's 2 years younger than me, and she's like, yeah, and you wouldn't share any with me. I don't even remember her being there. I was pretty little, but apparently when you get the cough medicine and you're a food addict, you just hog it all down. But I did not it took me a while to recognize that I was not the same as others. I was at a friend's house and there was a bowl of candy sitting there, like I think it was M&Ms. In fact, I know it was M&Ms because, sticks in your head when you got that addict brain. And I was just so confused, like, what is this bowl sitting here and no one's eating out of it? Like, that just doesn't happen. Like, it just sits there on the shelf. Like, I could not comprehend that. That just blew me away. And so I started, and I played sports. I'm really tall, by the way. I'm 6 foot tall, and you can see that the weight eventually did catch up with me. But I played sports in college, and I had a good old time. But I used to call myself a sugaraholic. It was embarrassing, going on a binge and just eating all the way too much, way more than other people. Other people are stopped, and this is too sweet, and I'm full, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't relate to that at all. But I did call myself a sugar addict, and I used to say they ought to have a 12-step program for sugaraholics. I did not, I really recognized that I was the same as like an alcoholic. I recognized that at about the age of 19 or 20. And still thin all those years. And it's interesting though, because even though I was thin, I knew that I couldn't, I didn't have boundaries over food. I had shame about food, and I was really depressed, and I led like a double life. Like on the outside, like I was playing sports, setting records, graduating with good grades, I'm like I'm also, by the way, an award-winning codependent. You know, I'm the teacher of the year and I'm your volunteer of the year. I'm doing all these things. And underneath all of that, I had just like this codependency, lack of boundaries, perfectionism. I was very depressed, very, very depressed, and even suicidal at the age of about 28, 29. I spent a couple of years crying, just crying. And this all, you know, this is not because I was overweight, but I was an addict, right? So it's interesting, those of us who really struggle. And as you can see, the weight caught up with me, and my high was 270. It started catching up with me when I was like 30 to 40, and then I got really, my life was kind of spinning out of control. So I was so grateful when I found recovery. I found a 12-step program. I go to FA, and like it just blew my mind. I felt like I was home. People were talking about, all the stuff that you just feel so ashamed of, like, can you believe that I did this and this? Like I would, and this is typical for us food addicts. I've heard other people say this. I would eat a healthy breakfast, pack a healthy lunch for school, and then the bell would ring at 3 o'clock and my car would drive me to the donut shop. Okay. I could not seem to drive anywhere else. Like it just had a mind of its own. And I was ordering donut holes, the little Timbits from Tim Hortons. I started with the 10 piece. This is embarrassing, but it's not really, because I have a disease, but I started with a 10 pack and it wasn't enough. And I was eating 20 pieces of the little donut holes every day after school. And that was just the beginning of my nightly binge that I would go on, and then the next morning I'd be like, okay, come on, you can do this, Tosca. And I couldn't stop. And my weight was just going up and up and up. So this is how I came into the 12-step world. I was so ready to surrender and to follow a food plan and to get a sponsor and to jump in. And that was 4 years ago. And as you can see in my before and after picture, that's about 110 pounds off of me. I was like 163 yesterday morning, and I was about 273 in that bigger picture of me. Yeah, it was painful to not be able to stop and to just be so obsessed about food and to just want to stop and not be able to. So for whatever reason, God's led my path down to quitting teaching. I was a math teacher, and now I am a food addiction coach. And that last picture is me teaching some 12-step stuff at a food addiction retreat that I worked at. And so we will jump on. Now, I'm going to dive into the disease concept. Now, we are recording this, and you will get a link to the recording afterwards, so you can rewatch it. But here's your chance to ask questions. I've asked Karen to come here. You can type questions into the chat as you want. And, we can stop and talk about stuff as we go. Okay, so that's fine. You guys are here live. How many people are here live? 35. That's great. All right, so we're going to talk about the two parts of food addiction. I got to shrink you guys down so I can't really see many of you, but shout out, Karen, if we've got questions. All right, so food addiction and addiction in general has two parts to it, two parts of the disease, the physical part and the mental part. And you guys, this is key information. Okay, I cannot emphasize more that there are so many people out there floundering in addiction that don't understand that there's two parts of the disease, and they're treating one half or the other half, and they're never treating both at the same time. And you'll see why that's very important for us to treat both at the same time. So we're going to start on the physical side. Our addiction, if you are indeed a food addict, our addiction starts when you eat a substance that triggers the addictive reaction in the brain. And now this actually applies to drugs and alcohol and all kinds of other things as well. but we're talking about food, but it's the same exact cycle. Addiction is a mental health disease, okay? But it has a physical component to it. So we have what we call, this is a Russian roulette. We can have two reactions when we eat something that triggers us. We could have just a normal reaction. We call that click. Like, you pull the trigger and the bullet wasn't in the chamber. We could just have a normal reaction to food. That happens sometimes, which is confusing to us who have food addiction, because sometimes we think, oh, I did okay with this that day. But often what happens is we have an abnormal reaction. And that means we call that a bang. It's a bang day. What happens is we develop a physical craving. So I don't know how many of you can relate, but if I have one piece of candy, all of a sudden I need to have all the pieces of candy. If I don't have any candy at all, I'm kind of okay. I mean, I want it because I'm an addict, but if as soon as I take one cookie, and everyone's always like, can't you just have one? Can't you eat in moderation? Not if you're an addict, because this physical craving reaction that happens in our brains is actually a dopamine response. And the dopamine reward cycle in our brain, the brains of addicts are different than the brains of normal people, if we call them, quote, normal people. Normal people do not have the level of dopamine that yes, they enjoy the cookie, but we're not just enjoying the cookie. This physical craving develops, and all we want is more and more and more, okay? So the physical craving spins into a binge, which we absolutely can't stop doing. And this is what I was talking about when I, packed my breakfast and healthy lunch. But as soon as I started with these donut holes, that was just the beginning of my day. Now, at the end of this cycle, we come to what we call the national anthem of they actually refer to it with alcoholics, but the national anthem for addicts is like when we swear off, like we have a big emotional, like I've got to stop. Oh my gosh, I have to stop. We get a hold of ourselves and we actually stop binging. And that's when we actually start moving into the mental side of the disease, okay? And by the way, whether we had a click day or a bang day, we always come back into life is still happening. And we experience life as it comes. We can be restless, irritable, and discontent. We have things that happen that drive us to fear and guilt and shame and resentment. And these things all pile into what we call the emotional barometer. Okay, and the emotional barometer over here, this comprises the mental component of our disease. So we've now taken a step, this national anthem, we've sworn off, we've like, I'm not going to have any, and we get on the diet, right? I don't know how many of you guys get on the diet, we lose some weight, we're staying off, but in the meantime, life is piling up in this emotional barometer. So here's why addiction is a mental health disease. Because when this barometer gets filled up, normally when the barometer's kind of when we're calm, we have enough willpower, like a wall, to keep us from using our substance, whatever it is, as the solution to our problems. We have willpower. I mean, willpower only takes us so far. And that's what happens with the emotional barometer. Once things pack up in our lives and we just, and for a lot of us, we've had a lot of trauma in our lives and a lot of hurt and a lot of resentments. A lot of us don't have a lot of room in this emotional barometer at all. So little things happen and all of a sudden this thought pops in our head. Mental obsession. Hey, I think, what would make me feel better? To have a little of this or a little of that. And this thought that comes is absolute insanity sometimes. I'll just have one. This time I'll have one. I'll restart my diet on Monday. I just need to make an exception today. It's been a hard day. I mean, and in fact, I've heard some really crazy mental obsessions. Like I had someone tell me she was flying on a plane. And so it didn't matter if she ate food because she was on the plane. Like she wasn't in any country. I don't know. I don't know how that's not logical at all, but That was her thought, was like, oh, I can eat it. It's okay. I'm on a plane. So once this mental obsession develops and we actually decide, oh, I'm going to use, then we're right back into the physical side again. And we just go round and round this cycle. This is called the roundabout. And there's no escape. And we start diets and then we fail diets. And we start diets and we gain weight and then we lose weight and then we gain weight. And this cycle, in order to stop it, we actually have to treat both sides of this disease at the same time. We have to start with the physical side. We can't actually treat anything if we're still ingesting our substance. But we also have to come over to the emotional barometer and treat that as well. And that's what's really critical information for us addicts. I did want to add one more thing about the science of food addiction with the physical side of things, because I talked about the dopamine cycle and the reward cycle, but there's also a hormone cycle that's going on with us. And for many of us, you might know about, when you eat sugar that your body produces insulin. You might not know about leptin. Leptin is the hormone that your body releases when you've had enough to eat. And it actually tells you, oh, you're full, you've got energy, let's get up and do something. I don't know if any of you have experienced eating a whole bunch and then still being hungry. Like I can never feel full. Like my stomach is so packed with food and I still don't feel full. That's different than the craving. The craving is the dopamine cycle. The not getting full has to do with this leptin. So leptin gets in our bloodstream when we're full, and it should travel up to our brain and tell our brain, hey, you're full, stop eating, get moving. But because if we are ingesting a lot of sugar, it produces so much insulin that actually blocks the leptin from getting to our brain, so that our brain actually can't see, like our brain doesn't know that we have leptin in our bloodstream. So our brain thinks that we're starving to death. It's like a famine. Our brain thinks we're dying of hunger. Our bodies are not dying of hunger. We've just ingested a ton of food. We have a lot of weight to lose. But because our brains think that we're starving, this lower part of your brain will kick in and say, you're going to eat. Even if you, like with all your willpower in the front part of your brain, you think, I should be full. But there's a deeper part of your brain that actually will kick in and like force you to eat for survival. It's like a survival part of your brain. So that stuff is happening in our bodies, and we really need a solution to that. So are there any questions over this slide before I move on? Nobody? Nothing? Okay. Jumping on ahead. So the next thing I forgot to talk about one thing. Powerlessness. Yeah, we are powerless in two spots on this slide. We're powerless over our reaction to the food when we eat it, and we're powerless over our mental obsessions. So both of these things are places that this is where we need the treatment. Here we're going to jump into the symptoms of addiction. The disease of addiction is actually quite a bit deeper than just the food. Our disease makes us, it's literally a dis-ease. We don't feel good. We feel bad. We feel restless, irritable, and discontent. And it pops out in all kinds of areas. So one of the symptoms of addiction is our physical health, right? Our physical health really suffers. And let's see here. Yeah, our physical health suffers. We get overweight. We have a lot of depression. That's with the mental health. We have depression. We can have in fact, there's been some links between sugar consumption and schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. That's some new research that's starting to come out. So that is one of our symptoms, as well as we can have financial issues. not just the fact that we're overspending on our binge foods, which I like to think that I might have been spending about $500 a month on binge foods. I mean, that's like $6,000 a year. That's a lot of money. And I didn't have money at the time, but we also have other kinds of financial issues. Like many of us, because of our addiction, become spenders. Like we can be addicted to spending, right? And so we're shoppers, shopaholics. I know me, I'm big into the yard sales. We can have work troubles, not just because that we are kind of handicapped by our addiction, but also we can be addicted to working. We can be trying to find our value in working. And so that can be part of the problems with work. We can have spiritual problems. I know for me, I felt very disconnected from God. I also, along spiritual lines, like I was dishonest. I was not the person I wanted to be spiritually, and I hated myself on the inside. We can have legal troubles, although this tends to be a little bit more for drug and alcoholic people. Eating and driving is still legal at this point, but many people actually do have legal trouble. I know for me, I did some shoplifting as a kid. I never got caught, but I was certainly shoplifting for food because of my addiction. We can have relationship issues. Codependency is huge amongst addicts in general, and I think particularly food addicts. So, when we're in the food, we're not having honest relationships with others. We're lying to others. We're sneaking and hiding. We're isolating. Or for me, like I said, I'm an award-winning codependent. So I'm finding all my value and pouring my life into other people and neglecting myself. That's a different form of addiction. And the last thing I have here is actually the substance abuse, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or food, nicotine, caffeine. This is just another one of the symptoms. Now, the thing is, in our lives, these are the things that cause us pain. These things cause us pain. So what we tend to want to do is treat these symptoms. But if any of you guys know about illnesses, we don't just want to treat the symptoms. If we don't get to the root of our disease, if we don't get to the heart of what makes us restless, irritable, and discontent, it's like whack-a-mole. You take care of the food, you quit eating the food, and it just pops out and you become a shopaholic. Or many people stop drinking or doing drugs, and then it pops out as a food addiction. There's a lot of people who are food addicts who have that as their story, is that I was an alcoholic and a druggie, I quit that, I got in recovery, and all of a sudden I can't stop eating. So we have to actually get to the root. It's like a weed where it's all tied together deep under the earth, and we really have to get in there to treat it. If we just treat the symptoms, it's just whack-a-mole. It's going to pop up somewhere else. Any questions about that?
How do you spell the hormone that you mentioned? Leptin?
Leptin, Leptin, I believe. Okay. Good question. I'm glad I knew the answer, I think.
And are you going to talk about the progressiveness of the disease? Because that's what scares me the most about my disease.
Yes. Yes, I am. All right. Next thing. We are moving on. Okay, what we're going to actually do, this is exactly what we're going to talk about, Maureen. So perfect that you brought that up. We are going to do an assessment together. And this assessment is the ACORN Self-Assessment 3. So If any of you guys have not been sure of exactly what Maureen said, which is what is the progression of my disease? Do I have food addiction, and how bad do I have it? Because it progresses over time. I'm going to actually read while I put things up on the screen, and we're going to take one level at a time. And you don't really need to do anything. You can jot things down if you want, but all you really need to do is kind of count. You could kind of count with your fingers how many of these symptoms you relate to. And if you have 3 or 4 of them in a given stage, then you're either at that stage or you've passed through that stage, okay? So I am going to read these, and let's see if I can read and post this at the same time. So I'm looking at the early stage now, symptoms of the early stage. The first one I have is you really enjoyed eating. Back in the early stage, you occasionally ate more than you wanted, but you could control it. You envied those who could eat more and control their weight. You noticed that you were sometimes more interested in food than your family, friends, or peers. You occasionally binged and didn't tell anyone. You often remembered the first time you ate a particular food or foods, and you thought of food as a comfort. So if you can relate to 3 or 4 of those, if that's current, then you might be an early stage food addict. And I'm going to move on to the middle stage, and we'll see if you have hit that stage. So middle stage symptoms. You had special foods or treats, which you ate quite frequently. You became heavier than was healthy for your size or build. You dieted more than once in 5 years. You experimented with other ways to control your weight, fasting, purging, hypnosis, diet pills, etc. You lost weight and then gained it back. You made friends who liked to eat the way you did. You sometimes ate especially fast or especially slowly. You had the experience of not remembering that you ate something. You found there were times you wanted to stop eating, but you could not. You often snacked or grazed before, between, or after meals. You were often preoccupied with food or dieting between meals. You wanted to stop grazing or overeating, and you thought of food as your friend. So that's the middle stage. All right, if you had 3 or 4 of those, then you've passed through that stage or you're in that stage now. Here comes the next stage, late stage. You had foods that you had to eat almost every day. You often felt guilty, ashamed, or depressed after eating. You sometimes lied, cheated, or stole to protect your food. You had doctors, dietitians, or counselors tell you that you needed to lose weight or change the way you eat, and you didn't. You suffered from consequences that you really didn't want from overeating, and you could not stay stopped when you tried. You were in therapy or a 12-step program for your eating disorder and were unable to get abstinent or kept relapsing. You really decided to stay stopped more than once and were not able to do so. There were times almost every day between or after meals that you are preoccupied with food or eating more. You sometimes wanted to be eating or alone with your food more than being with good friends or relatives. Your overeating affected your relationships, work, and or spiritual life. You ate while driving, even after you have had close calls. You considered yourself shameful or immoral for how you ate. And you thought of food as your lover or the only place you could really go for comfort. That's late stage food addiction. And we have one more stage of that. We have the final stage. Final stage food addiction. You often did not enjoy eating as you once did, but you ate anyways. You kept eating long after it had stopped being enjoyable. You were hospitalized, jailed, or institutionalized because of food-related behavior. You sometimes thought you would rather die than stop eating your binge foods. You felt it was utterly hopeless for you to be able to have a healthy relationship with food. You could not always tell when you were telling the truth about food. You stopped going to doctors, dietitians, or counselors because you knew you couldn't do what they suggested. You tried a 12-step program, but could not get abstinent even for a day. You thought of food as the most important thing in your life, even though it is creating havoc with your whole life. You only wanted to eat more, even when you're physically unable to eat another bite. You lost jobs, relationships, or the ability to function effectively because of your weight or eating behavior. You considered taking your own life as the only answer left. And you acted as if food was a false god and the most important thing in your life. And the final thing is there's no stage after that. It's just food addiction is killing people. It's killing people. It's like the leading cause of death in the world. I know that that's not on the birth certificate of people. It's like diabetes or heart disease or something. But why are people, these are obesity related deaths and people just can't stop eating. They just can't. And that's why food addiction is just the most horrific disease, really. It's awful. So I know this is pretty sobering. And at this point, let me stop sharing for just a second so I can see you guys. I don't like that I can't see people when I'm in PowerPoint mode. So at this point, you should have assessed yourself whether you're early stage or mild or late stage or final stage. And what I want to say is it's very sobering, but there's hope. See, because you're looking at Karen and me, and we both were, late stage food addicts. And would you say you're late stage, Karen? Yeah. Yeah, she's saying yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, my food addiction was severe. And this is just one type of assessment. And I'm actually, Karen, I'm wondering if you'll drop into the chat the Yale Food Addiction Scale. We have another assessment that you could take. That's the Yale Food Addiction Scale. And this one is actually scientifically validated. And it gives you, it's aligned with the DSM-5 as far as substance use disorder. And there are 11 different criterion that make someone, they call them having a substance use disorder, and it could be mild, moderate, or severe would be the way they categorize it, or none if you happen to not have any. So if you click on that or save it for later, or and we'll tell you the address again at the end, but it's all on the Shift website, foodaddiction.com, so it's actually kind of easy. But it's very sobering to find out that you have a disease. And honestly, you guys, yes, a disease, not like a disease. Sometimes people are like, oh yeah, I can see the metaphor of a disease. No, it's not a metaphorical disease. It's a disease. There's actually differences in the brain, and there's actually nothing you can do about it. It's a disease. But the good news is, like I said, Karen and I really have found recovery that works one day at a time. And the amount of people that can lose weight and keep it off is like less than 1% in the world. And you're looking at Karen and I, who are both in the less than 1% category. And I've been in recovery for, Karen, you've got 9 years, did you say? 7 years?
7 years back to back.
Yeah.
And 14 years total.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm a baby compared to Karen. I'm coming up on 4 years. But I cannot tell you how different my relationship with food is now. And it's not willpower, you guys. There's actually treatment that works. When we look at both sides of the disease, if we really treat both sides of the disease at the same time and get what we need, the structure we need, your relationship with food changes. My brain has healed. I can sit next to people eating blah, 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 whatever, and it does not bother me anymore. I promise you, there is recovery out there. But there are some key elements that you need in order to get this treatment. And it's really important that you treat both. I cannot say that enough. Got to get treatments for both. We're not going on a diet. This is not a diet. Diets do not work for food addicts. I don't know if you noticed that yet or not. Evelyn, yes, you have a question. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
What about caffeine? I I think the idea of giving up caffeine for me is actually scarier than giving up sugar. Even though I think I do, I don't think, I think the sugar is having a worse effect. The caffeine, but I don't know if it's possible to, or if is caffeine part of the addiction cycle?
Really good question. Really good question. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would have to say that that many people are in the same boat as you. Many. And that's why the shift food plan, when we do a food plan, not a diet, let me rephrase, it is definitely not a diet, but it cuts out the triggering substances and it cuts caffeine out, because for most food addicts that are on the severe stage or late stage, caffeine has become a problem for them. Yeah. And so that is, very good question.
Oh, okay.
It just triggers us. It gets us going. It gets our appetite going. It gives us a spark of adrenaline. And we're addicts. So no matter what the substance is, we can dive into it. Like I said, whack-a-mole. We put one thing down, we'll pick something else up. So we really have to be careful about the things that we just like dive into, because we're using them as to cover our restless, irritable, and discontentment.
So,
are
Jeanette
things given up in stages? Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Things are given up in, are things given up in stages, or is it best to remove all the addictive substances at once?
Yeah, that's also, Karen, you want to speak to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, so my experience was both times that I got abstinent, I was asked to give up caffeine and sugar at the same time. And I did. And one of the reasons I figured out that there was a physiological addiction was the first time I gave up flour and sugar and caffeine, I felt like I had a stomach flu for 3 days. And then when I was getting out of relapse in treatment, I had the same stomach flu again. And that's because it wasn't stomach flu. It was withdrawal symptoms. Virtual withdrawal symptoms of being separated from those clinically proven addictive substances. We have some questions in the chat, Tosca, when you're ready.
Yeah, I do see that. So I kind of want to, all right. I have another slide, so I kind of want to save Carol's question about abstinence. I'll save that, and Joyce's comment. I'll take up the Ozempic one. Actually, let's save all of those for the end, because I do have a couple more slides and we will definitely address all these things. So make sure I get to them when we go back. So let me reshare, because what I want to look at right now are the treatment options. And part of the reason why, am I on there? There we go. Part of the reason why I had you do the assessment is because the treatment for different stages gets more and more structured. Okay, so if you are just an early stage, the physical side of the disease, you may be able to just be aware of your sugar and flour intake, and you might be able to be okay with that. If you're just early stage, if you're middle stage, you might need a food plan, and you might be able to do some exceptions. maybe no flour, no sugar, but maybe now and then you have something. If you're a late stage or a final stage food addict, you're having exceptions to your food plan, like, oh, it's my birthday, I need to have a piece of this cake. Like, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. We don't have a choice with our reaction to putting the flour and sugar in us. The brain triggers, the cravings trigger, we're powerless over that. So having no exceptions actually gets us off of that roundabout loop. And it's giving yourself exceptions is literally putting you in the worst place for a food addict, because now you've got to like overpower those cravings again and go through another national anthem cycle and all of that. And often many of us can't get out of these binges for like years sometimes. So when we talk about committed food, we can talk about that later. But committed meals means and this is how I operate in my life. I do not make food choices in the day. I picked what I was going to eat today yesterday. I picked it yesterday. I wrote it down. I said, this is what I'm going to eat. When I got to today, I just ate that. It's so simple. It's like this weird little ninja trick to like take the addictive part of my brain out of the game. And when you do that for a while, and you get this automaticity going, your addict part of your brain just calms down. If someone's like, ooh, does that look good? That smells good. Maybe I can have that. Nope, because I already picked what I'm going to eat. It's yesterday. And granted, I love my food and I enjoy all my food. But this is just a way of protecting us from our own disease. If you're in a final stage or you're very, very strict, I know some people who need to do this. They need to have no concoctions. They need to commit their meals. They need to not have a lot of condiments. They need their food groups to not touch each other. I know people who do that kind of recovery. And for many people, if you're later final stage, if you can't stop eating on your own, like you can't even get enough traction to like break out of the roundabout, this is what in-person detox is for. Okay. And that's why Shift exists. Okay. Shift is here for, actually Shift has offerings, and I'll talk about that. Shift really has everything for all the stages of food addiction, but the heart of what Shift does is to really reach the people that are the sickest with in-person treatment. That's what Shift does. We actually have a safe place to be, and we will get you off of your food if you can't do it on your own. So that's the physical side, but let's look at the mental treatment. Okay, if you're in early stage, maybe just learning about the science of food addiction. And there's actually a food freedom online course that Shift offers that might be perfect for you. It's just self-paced and it's like kind of self-guided. There's no like given food plan. You kind of develop your own food plan. That might work if you have early stage food addiction. If you're in middle stage and we're talking about treating the emotional barometer, maybe you can clear that emotional barometer out with some therapy, some meditation, support groups, buddies, get some accountability. Shift has Shift Strong meetings, which I'll talk about again towards the end. They're free and anyone can join them all the time. That might be enough for people. If you're in late stage food addiction, you probably need a program. You need a program. You need a 12-step program. A sponsor is a wonderful tool. I have a sponsor that I give my food to and I stay accountable to. We have tools of the program that we do, like outreach calls and meetings that we go to and different readings that we do and exercises, journaling exercises. These really help us to keep our emotional barometer clear enough so that we don't get back into the food, because once you get out, you still have to worry about those mental obsessions that develop. Final stage, and then we have, I didn't even mention, we have the Shift Intensive. Really intensive work is done at the intensive, which is probably why they named it the intensive. When you go to a Shift Intensive, you don't talk about food the whole time. You have abstinent food and you learn how to weigh and measure it. But what you're really doing all day is like 8 hours of group processing together. It's very intense and it's beautiful and super healing. there's nothing better. If you're in final stage, I know people who do every tool every day. They have professional addiction counselors, which we have through Shift. They get a lot of support. And I know what is going on in you guys' brains, because I am like you. It's like, oh no, I should be able to fix this on my own. Like, why do I have to go to do all these things and get professional help? Well, if you are that sick of a food addict, you may need to do that. And it's kind of just like if you had cancer, it would be so ridiculous to be like, oh, I should cure this on my own. I should probably just stay home and fix this. I should be able to get over this. It's really that ridiculous. But we do that because we keep beating ourselves up in our heads because we think it's our fault. And if we could just do better, and if I just had more willpower. I know, because I spent years there. And it's not that way. If you need help, there is actually professional help, just like you would go to a doctor for cancer. Food addiction is killing people across this world and robbing people of their joy of life. And there is treatment out there. There really is. So, is there any, oh, I have one more thing I can click on here. Yeah. Notice that as the disease progresses down here at the bottom, you really need to kind of slide down the scale from I'm running the show to external direction. I'm not running the show. It's not self-will anymore. So the more ill you are with food addiction, the more we really need the external support. Okay. Any questions about that? I will jump forward. I got a couple more things to say. Okay, so on this slide right here, why do eating disorder clinics miss the mark? I'm actually I so liked looking at you guys. Okay. Eating disorder clinics are designed to treat a disease that we don't have. I mean, many of us actually do have eating disorders, and eating disorders overlap with food addiction quite a bit. But food addiction is a substance use disorder, okay? It's a physiological reaction to ingesting a substance that triggers us. Eating disorders are like emotionally eating, right? So when you go to an eating disorder clinic, if they're treating an emotional eater, they don't really need to have strict food rules. In fact, anorexics, as you know, would get kind of a kick out of these restrictive food rules. So what they really want to do in an eating disorder clinic is like get rid of food rules and just disassociate our emotions from our food rules. So they really just want to treat the emotional, like a lot of eating disorder people have trauma, a lot of trauma, and they're very sad inside, and they really need a lot of therapy. And they can eat a cookie or a cupcake or something. And they need to learn how to do that because they're really obsessed about food rules and control. But if you have substance use disorder and you you go to an eating disorder clinic and they say, just eat this one cookie and try not to have, try not to let your feelings get mixed up in it. It has nothing to do with feelings for us. We have a substance use disorder. So as soon as you eat that one cookie, the cravings are going to get set off, and all you're going to be able to think about is eating more and more and more. And that's not your fault. So eating disorder clinics are beautiful things designed for people who are not food addicts. There are a couple eating disorder clinics that I know of that will actually give you an abstinent food plan and will work with you if you're a food addict, but not very many. And many food addicts have been harmed by going to eating disorder clinics. There's a lot of stories out there about people who just, Amanda's story herself. I mean, she went to treatment and she, I think, paid like $30,000 to go to a treatment. And, it didn't work for her because that's not the disease she has. And she spent 1 week at a shift intensive and has been abstinent ever since. So eating disorder clinics are nowhere near ready to take on food addicts. So just be cautious with that. Now, back to my next slide, which is the doozy. Yes. the slippery slope. And this is where I'm going to actually answer more of those questions about abstinence and about what you can eat and things like that. So the slippery slope, what we have here is, I got to get you guys smaller because there's stuff all over the screen. The bottom down here in the ditch over here, this is representing addictive eating. And up here is too restrictive. And this is what makes food addiction way harder than drugs and alcohol, way harder. Because with drugs and alcohol, just don't have them. You don't need them. But with food, we have to eat, right? And so we have to like get this right balance. We can't be down in the ditch eating addictively, but we also can't be too restrictive. In fact, being hungry for food addicts is a dangerous ground. So what we have on the too restrictive side are things like intermittent fasting, very difficult for food addicts to pull off. Diets, they're calorie restrictive. Of course, I'm sure many of you have been very hungry. And then where do you find yourself going when you're very hungry? Sliding right down and eating the junk. If you're at all like me, you're not hitting some sort of balanced, I'll eat a little bit more, but not the junk. No, we're going straight to the junk. So eating flour and sugar would be like here on the slippery slope for me. I'm just representing that. Sweeteners are on this slope. BLT stands for bites, licks, and tastes. If you're cooking and you take a little taste here and a little bite there, that's on the slippery slope. That's not addictive eating, but what happens to us is that it leads us to addictive eating. Nuts can be a problem for many, many food addicts. Coffee with cream in it can be a problem. Even a banana can be a problem for some people. And that is what, okay, here's the road to food neutrality. We love this road over here. There is a safe place for us to walk, for us to eat. And what makes that place? Well, here's my representation of a normal person. They're like a four-wheel drive truck. A normal person can say, hey, I've had a bad day and I'm going to go out and eat XYZ and totally pig out. And then they can just drive right back up and get on this safe road. That's fine because they're a normal person. Me, here would be like an early stage food addict. And I consider myself a late stage food addict. I consider myself handicapped. I'm like in a wheelchair and I need to stay on this road. As soon as I get over on this slope right here, I'm sliding back in. So how can I stay in the safe zone for eating? And it's so different for different people. That's what makes it really, really tricky. Is like, I can eat a banana, I can eat nuts, but some people can't. Some people can have coffee and be a food addict and they'll be okay, but some people can't. So it gets really tricky. So what we have here is we have a guardrail, which for many of us is a sponsor and a food plan. And it's just like a safety net that keeps us inside of this guardrail right here. We commit our food like I was talking about before. We say, this is what I'm going to eat. And I just eat that. And it's so safe. It's so safe. And it really, there's science behind it. Like it takes the part of our brain out of the game. The part of our brain that's the addictive part of our brain is the part that's making last minute decisions about how to put food together. But our planning part of our brain, and you guys know this, because how many times do you say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to eat this and this and this, and we plan it and we want to do well. And then the moment comes and we're hungry and we change our minds, right? And that's the addictive part of our brain. So no changing your mind. We just make a commitment. I'm just going to eat this food and that's what we eat. We also use a scale. And the scale, I actually put it on this side of the road because the scale keeps us eating a lot of food, enough food. I eat a lot of food. I eat enough for my weight my weight has stayed the same for all these years now. I eat the same food and my weight stays the same. It's perfect. So if we are messing around like this early stage food addict here, look at my little person, I can make him slide up and down. Isn't that cute? If you're an early stage and you want to have coffee and bananas and sweeteners and you want to slide up and down the slope and fight your way up and down, you can do that. But now and then, I'm sure you're going to slip and fall. As for me, being in a wheelchair, I don't want to play around on that side of the road. So what that means is sometimes we say goodbye to foods that we might be able to eat, but it's not worth it. Like, I don't want to test out every food and say, oh, can I eat a banana or not? Which I do eat bananas, and many of us food addicts do. That's just an example. Oh, that's the end. Karen, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I actually developed a saying for myself, which I'm quite proud of.
Okay.
It's kind of, my need to give up a certain food substance is inversely proportional to my desire to do it. That's my litmus test. If someone came up to me and said, Karen, you can never have a Brussels sprout again, I would go, all right, I hardly eat them anyway. But when somebody takes something, wants to modify my food plan with something that's more attractive to me and I don't want to do it, then I have to take a look at that. And, you know, for example, for a long time on the Acorn food plan, which was developed from the Glen Bay food plan, artificial sweeteners were allowed. But then they found that it kept catching people up. And once they separated from artificial sweetener, then suddenly abstinence became more sustainable.
Yeah.
So yeah, inversely proportional. If it's something I don't really like, I'm absolutely willing to give it up. If it's something that really attracts me, then that's a sign that that food is a danger food for me.
Problem. Yeah, I agree. And I have to laugh because so many people are like, you know, I could have this or that. And you know, for me, it's just the line of, I need a line. I need someone to draw the line. I can't draw the line. I cheat. If I draw the line, I will cheat. So I need an external line. So with the program that I work, I get my food plan and my rules from my sponsor. And my sponsor said, corn, you can't have corn as a vegetable. It has to count as a grain. And I was like, what the heck, you know, and I can have corn as a grain, come on. But what I need, what I've learned in my food plan is it does not really matter what's in or out of my food plan. The one thing that we need in a food plan is surrender. We cannot do without surrender. So there almost has to be like a stupid rule. I call it a stupid rule, some sort of stupid rule that we have to follow, because it really needs to not be my plan. I need to turn my will over to a sponsor, a food plan, and to something external to me, because if it's in me, I end up cheating. So whatever the food plan is, and there are many, many, many food plans that work, and they all have no flour, no sugar, no sweet, you know, I know food addicts who eat sweeteners, like Karen was saying, and they have long time abstinence. But for many of us, sweeteners trip us up, and sweeteners are bad for us. And the really good news is when you quit eating flour, sugar, and sweeteners, after about, I don't know, what would you say, Karen, a couple weeks, your palate starts adjusting, and foods, trust me, when you start, you'll be like, oh, this food tastes so bland. Give it a couple weeks. Your palate changes. Everything adjusts. We've been so overstimulated. I love my food, and I haven't eaten flour, sugar, or sweeteners in 4 years. And my food is delicious.
I used to have sugar on berries, even when I was a kid. Berries were really good. Strawberries were good, but they were better with sugar. And then probably 2 or 3 weeks into my new food plan, my morning breakfast consisted of yogurt and berries and other elements.
Unsweetened yogurt.
Unsweetened yogurt, plain yogurt, and berries. And my sponsor at the time told me, look, I want you to give this a try. It will taste like, pardon the word, crap to you for 2 weeks, and then it will taste like ice cream. And she was right.
Yeah, we adjust, our brains adjust. It's beautiful. Yeah. Okay, so are there any questions about this? This is kind of a lot of info at this point. And let me look back at the chat. Oh, you dropped some stuff in there, didn't you, Karen? I see. Yes, okay. And now we can talk about the Ozempic. Ozempic and some of the shots that are going out now. That I'm going to stop sharing so I can talk to you people. I have heard from Dr. Vera Tarman, I've heard her refer to the shots, the different kinds of shots that are coming out nowadays, as they might be useful possibly as a bridge into recovery, but they're certainly not really good for long-term abstinence. Also, they really do nothing to treat the addiction. They really aren't. And I have to say, you guys, this is one thing I didn't say yet. And I'm sure Karen would agree with me. I don't even care about the 110 pounds that I lost. There is so much, because I got to the heart, and I'm still getting to the heart of the problem, which is my restless, irritable discontentment. And so like the self-hatred that I used to have, the self-abuse, the depression, like that's gone. Not completely. I still have bad moments, but it's like 95% gone. That's where it's at. It's not about the weight. And Amanda always talks about losing the weight, and then and you always imagine, if I could just stay at this weight, my problems will be over. No, they won't. You'll still be restless, irritable, and discontent, and you'll slip off of the diet and you'll gain the weight back. So what we're really treating is the inner spirit and mental stuff. And the food plan is just the easy part. That's the quick part. So taking these shots to try to get around doing the work of recovery or whatever, you're shortcutting yourself out of the most beautiful part of the program, which is the inner healing and the spiritual connection. And just I have so much more self-compassion. And I can't even tell you guys, it's just like the 110 pounds is like nothing to me compared to the weight that's off of my mind. Do you have anything to add to that, Karen?
Yes, actually. So one of my children worked in the drug addiction field, and her observation was there were people who became who treated their addiction with like Suboxone, or for heroin addiction, methadone. And the thing is they just traded one addiction for another. Once you stop taking the Ozempic, or there are many other names of things that use, your weight will come back. And it might be, as Tosca says, a really good way to like stop the bleeding, but it probably isn't a permanent solution.
Yeah.
And with abstinence is a lifelong solution.
Yeah. And it's so healthy too, because we're eating, we're just eating whole foods, normal foods. It's not like some sort of diet bars or whatever. No, just go to the vegetable and fruit section and just eat normal foods.
We have two good questions.
I do. I'm looking at them right now. As far as the fasting question goes, what are you finding for people who fast? And I did put that intermittent fasting on the side of too restrictive. What we say, like, for example, how long can you hold your breath? If I told you if you held your breath for 5 minutes, I'd give you $1 million. Could you hold your breath for 5 minutes? I mean, you might really want to hold your breath for 5 minutes, but when you get to the point of passing out, a different part of your brain kicks in and says, oh no, you will breathe. Like, you will breathe. I'm sorry, I don't know what you were thinking out here about the million, but the deep part of your brain says, we're breathing now. That's the same thing that happens with fasting, okay? And it's really dangerous for us as food addicts, because when we get to that point where, like, our bodies are already pretty whacked out. So when we get to the point where our body thinks, oh, we're in a famine, we're starving to death, our deeper part of our brain will say, you eat, you're going to eat. And it's probably not going to be the piece of broccoli that's sitting there that you're going to eat. You're probably going to end up diving into the flour and sugar. And then you're back into the cycle again. So There was a really interesting study that I want to share. This is going longer than an hour because I still have a couple more slides, but that's fine because you guys are really engaged. So, and yes, there's a recording coming. There was a psychologist who wanted to study this thing in his brain, but he couldn't get anybody to do the study because it was cutting someone's brain open and zapping them and testing this thing out. And so he had to do it on himself. And he really did this. There's a guy who really did this, cut his brain open, had his assistant get this little electrode in there and zap him, and it would make him point his toe. And, you know, that makes sense. We've all know the little zap here can, you know, change the muscles. So the thing that's really interesting about this, what his experiment was he coordinated with his assistant. And he said, okay, I'm really not going to point my toe. Like, I'm going to flex my foot back as hard as I can. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, I am going to flex my foot. I am not going to point my toe. And so 1, 2, 3, the guy zaps him, and sure enough, he points his toe. But he's freaking out. They repeat it over and over again. And what's really freaking him out is, as he's getting the zap, what's happening in his brain is he's changing his mind. He's like, oh, actually, I feel like pointing my toe. So what it appears to be in his brain is just like, I'm changing my mind. But obviously, the guy was giving him an external zap of electricity that was pointing his toe. And his brain was making up the story about it, saying, oh, I should probably point my toe now, even though he was really not going to point his toe a second before. And that's what happens with us, with our food. Have you ever changed your mind before? Like, I am not going to eat XYZ. I'm going to have this salad. I made the salad. The salad's right there. I bought the vegetables. How many of you have had vegetables rotting in your fridge because you bought them and then you were like, I changed my mind? That is absolutely a deeper part of our brain kicking in. And we think that we're bad people because we change our mind. And it's really like beyond our control. It really is. Our brains are hijacked and it's beyond our control. So
I'd like to, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Karen. Is that the first time you heard that story?
No, that is, but I'd like to take go at the question about fasting.
Sure.
Yeah, and so actually, I realized, you know, so I eat my food at a particular schedule. I wake up in the morning and I may have my breakfast at 6, and I get 3 meals and a metabolic adjustment over the course of about 12 hours. And then, you know, and then I stop eating, I go to bed, I sleep, and then I wake up. And so what I effectively do now is I intermittently fast because I eat at a normal schedule, whereas before it was a movable feast. I ate from, you know, early in the morning till late at night, and sometimes got up in the middle of the night and ate. So we do get that time that the intermittent fasting folks talk about to metabolize what we have and have our blood sugar drop so that all these wonderful things can happen. But it happens as an outcome of eating rationally and not, you know, deprivation.
Not, yeah, if we don't binge. Yes, I do the same, and I don't have a metabolic, so I end up with sometimes 14 hours between my dinner and my breakfast. And the craziest thing is, you guys, I'm never hungry. My stomach growled maybe 6 months ago once. I don't remember. Like, I'm never hungry. My blood sugar is so stable. I ate my dinner a little bit early tonight because of this. And I won't eat again till tomorrow morning, and I'll be fine. And I know because I've done it 100 times now. It's just, I'm so confident in my food plan, and my body is just so comfortable. It's a miracle. It really, really is. And on the question about flours, yeah, it's all flours, because what's really the problem, we can actually eat wheat. I eat shredded wheat all the time, and I use Triscuits, which some food addicts, that's too tricky for, but I do use Triscuits. It's the processing that allows it to blast into our bloodstream with a big spike instead of the natural digestive process that takes time. So then it comes into our bloodstream slowly. I eat fruit and I eat grains, and they don't trigger me. I eat a limited amount of fruit. I eat 6 ounces of fruit at breakfast and at lunch, and it doesn't trigger me. So I am never hungry. Although one time I accidentally took a swallow of soda because I thought it was a bubbly water. And so I took one swallow and I was like, what is this? And I didn't drink anymore. And from that one swallow, I was hungry that night. My stomach growled that night, and my stomach growled the next night, 24 hours later. So weird. From one swallow. I don't know. I find that fascinating. That's my one experiment with accidentally having a swallow of sugar. Back to sharing. We got to get this show on the road. I have a couple more things to do here. Moving on from this, I think. Yes. Okay, this is the last part, really. Why people don't get well, I think is what it says. I got stuff all over the top of this thing. Diet mentality. Boy, this is really hard to lose because we just want it. We just think if we just could lose the weight, we'd be okay. This is a recovery program. It's not a diet. It's not a diet. The food and the weight are symptoms of the deeper problem. We don't treat the symptoms. We treat the addiction. Okay. And if you're just in it, people say, there's so many people who come for the vanity, but they stay for the sanity. This is a program of recovery for mental health. It really, the outcomes, the weight outcomes, they resolve themselves. They are just symptoms of a deeper problem. Here's another big problem with food addiction: denial. And I don't just mean denial of like, I don't have a problem kind of denial, but denial of like, I mean, there's a lot of people out in the world that would say, oh, food can't be an addiction. Like you have to eat food, so food can't be an addiction. There's so many people pushing on you. You can have some, you can just have a little. No, not if I'm a food addict. I can't just have a little. I can't. The hopelessness and shame. People just think I'm worthless. I can't do it. I've tried 100 diets and I failed, and I just can't try again. And I promise you guys, this is different. This is not a diet. This is different. And if you step into this recovery program and get enough structure and support, there really is recovery for you. And here are these last two, time and money. It's so funny because it's not funny, it's sad, but many of us are codependents. And it's like my whole life is wrapped up in being needed by other people. And like so many people are like, no, you don't understand. My life is really busy. It's really crazy. And I just don't have time. A lot of times it's more time than money. Like I don't want to spend money on myself because I'll say, you know, first of all, I'll spend $500 a month on my junk food, but I wouldn't dare to like go to pay for a program for myself. Like, no, I wouldn't do that. But honestly, it's more the time than the money. Because I've actually had a couple times where I've offered some free stuff to people and people didn't take me up on it. They were like, no, I've got to go to work. You know, I'm a teacher. And I'm like, you have time off. It's called sick leave. You know, you're sick. And people just won't do it. They just won't. Evelyn, you're raising your hand again. You got a question?
Oh, yeah. Speaking of time, the time issue, that's an issue for me too. I guess I have this idea of it taking like recovery, especially beginning recovery, taking like all day, every day, or an unlimited amount of time. And I'm just wondering, how does one arrange that unless you're fortunate to have other people to pick up the slack? But
yeah, it's such a good question.
Okay.
Yeah, and that
Thank you.
what we find is that I just want to stop sharing again instead of looking at this. What we find is that people who are coming into recovery feel like, oh, this is just going to take so much time. But what you don't recognize is that your disease has been taking a ton of your time. Obsessing about food, eating food, hiding what you're doing, recovering from eating food. And you're miserable with that. And so when we do recovery behaviors, actually after a while you get used to it. You know, I do spend some time in the morning, probably between my meditation and my phone calls, like an hour at least, doing some inner work. And I do go to meetings and I do some journaling when I need to. And somehow I have more time now than I did before, because I was spending way more time in the disease than I am on my recovery. And I pursue recovery pretty hardcore because I was very miserable in my head and I don't want to be like that anymore. So I really put the time in. And it's like, I don't know, it's like a ninja trick or something. Somehow you have more time than you ever thought that you could before. Is that your experience as well, Karen?
Oh, yes. And for instance, I make wonderful meals, but I can whip up a meal from zero to table in like 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
I have a wonderful wonderful shortcuts that I employ and we share. Someone also asked, what is the oldest age of a person you have that started this process?
Oh.
And so I know people in their, I have a sponsee in her 80s that came to me as a sponsor through a 12-step program probably 2 years ago. So she was 80 when she came. And I have a current sponsor who's been a sponsee who's been abstinent for a year, cleanly absent for a year. She's 77 with multiple medical diagnoses. And life is better.
Nice. Edie, you have a question? Is it Edie? Did I say that right?
Yes, thank you. Early on in the presentation, you were talking about the hunger hormone and then also about the tendency for some to get kind of addicted to the feeling of fullness. And that's probably a couple different hormones. I think that's oxytocin. I don't know. You might even get I've heard that you might get some serotonin release with the stomach stretching feeling. So I'm in recovery, gratefully and successfully, and have been for some time. So my niece came to me. She was struggling with a lot of food obsession and everything. And so I really helped her to get off of the processed foods and things that were triggering a lot. But what she's very concerned with now is that she's addicted to that feeling of fullness, which I can relate to because especially my first abstinent plan included a lot more vegetables than I was accustomed. And so when I first started doing, the raw and the cooked, like I remember really loving that feeling, being so full. And it is a bit addictive. I'm not currently on that same plan. I'm not doing as many vegetables, but this niece does not need to lose weight. She probably needs to gain. So I fear giving her rules about weight measuring. I guess I'm just wondering how concerning is that part of, this, like you're sharing, this addiction is so complex. I mean, we've got the dopamine reactions and such, but yeah, what do you think about that part?
Yeah, there's definitely a volume addiction piece, for sure. And, as much as you're trying to be well-meaning, she probably needs to seek treatment from someone other than her relative. That's your niece, right? She should probably, get a solid food plan from a nutritionist and probably work a program of recovery, to find freedom from the obsessions. But yeah, I mean, I know actually for a lot of you, if you've never tried an abstinent food plan yet, the first thing you'll find out is that it's so much food that it's hard to eat it all, and it takes a little while to get that hang of eating all these vegetables. But it's a good balance, and for some people it needs to be adjusted, like you're saying, Edie. Yeah, we definitely don't want to do the overstuffed thing And that is a big part.
So in that case, would you back off of someone's food plan on the amount of vegetables and so forth if that was really something they're talking about?
Yeah, probably. And
Mhm.
that's the kind of thing we have to do too for people who have had bariatric surgery that just can't put the quantity of vegetables that we normally have in, and we just have to adjust the plan, possibly make up for it with more fats. But you know, people,
Mhm.
they still don't need to have enough calories, right? It needs to not be restrictive. I mean, we can obviously, if we have weight to lose, we can be a little bit restrictive so that we do indeed drop the weight. But for most of us, if we could just stop binging, we'll lose the weight. Is the problem
And,
is that we keep binging.
and also, you know, when we're eating healthfully, there's a lot more fiber in what we eat. And so basically, our actual stomach may be smaller when we're eating highly caloric, you know, a candy bar is this big and it's got so many calories, you know, and, you know, a sweet potato and 3 ounces of steak might have the same amount of calories, but it's just physically volume more. So it's a process of you know, introducing more as you're able to. And it's interesting, in the 7-day intensive, we often see people complaining day 1 or day 2, oh, this is too much food. But then by day 7, they're like, oh, this is great. So it's a process,
Mhm.
and you know, you have, and the answer is not to make people eat until they're sick. It's to work with the client
Right.
till they get to the level of where they need to be, and also pinpoint what the problem is.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely, this is not just something that is, you know, like people should fix this on their own. It really isn't. Like professional help is definitely warranted in some places for sure. So I guess I would just encourage her to maybe seek some professional help, get a nutritionist in on the job, and then, you know, if it's one thing to get a food plan, but it's another thing to deal with the addiction at its heart, right? So
Sure.
yeah, it's more than just a nutritionist. Let me get back to, I only have a couple more slides, people. We've got to wrap this thing up sometime. I can't keep going all night. This is a very interesting slide. And what it really shows, I guess, if you want to look at this later and pause the video when you're watching the video, because there's a whole lot here. And this just goes to show you that our downward slide into addiction is a long, slow process. And that recovery is also a long, slow process. It's not just a snap your fingers and you're well kind of thing. So, yeah, take a pause on this or snap a picture of this with your phone, but except for I'm going to move on. So you're going to have to pause it with the video. So here's the things you can do that really will help you get well. First of all, if you've got the gift of desperation, go with that. The gift of desperation. If you are hurting and just hitting bottom, that's what we call it, seek help and surrender to a program. So rigorous honesty is super key. And that means it's actually a relief to share your secrets. When we go to the intensive, that's one of the exercises we do there, is share our food secrets with each other. And, you know, like I told you, it's kind of embarrassing how many donut holes I ate every single day. You know, the people at Tim Hortons, you know, I try to pretend like it wasn't just me there again to get my fix, you know, but it really was. So rigorous honesty is just a super huge gift that we can give ourselves in this. Acceptance and surrender, acceptance of the fact that this is a disease. Right now in your minds, some of you are probably saying, she's talking a lot, but I should be able to defeat this. I should be able to get better. If I only tried harder. No, it's a disease. Accepting the fact that you have a disease is a huge piece in recovery. Surrendering to a food plan, to a sponsor, to somebody else guiding you, actually surrendering is huge. Willingness to try new things, to try something that's not your, oh, I'll just go back to that, Weight Watchers plan and see if I can make that work for the 10th time. How about being willing to try something totally new? And then the key of all keys is actually taking action. Action, not just thinking about it or wishing you felt better about it, but actually taking an action. And I have to say, like when I started my food plan, I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. And I had the worst attitude. I was like, this is stupid. I mean, I wasn't even saying that in my head. I was saying it out loud. This is stupid. But I still did it. See, I still weighed my food exactly. So even though my attitude was bad, I got the experience of the freedom of a food plan. And so action is what we're after right here in recovery. Now, this is just my wrap up. Take the next step. Speaking of action, here is something that Shift offers. This is the top of the line. Honestly, it's like the best in the world, for real. We have in-person intensive. If you can't stop eating and you are killing yourself with food and your life is passing you by with food obsessions and diets, come to the intensive in November. Is that you in the picture, Karen? I was guessing. Yeah. Oh, sweet picture. When you come to the intensive, you will get abstinent because we will give you a food plan and there will not be any junk there. There will only be the food plan, food there. And they increased this to 8 days. You started at 5 days and then it was 7 days. Now it's 8 days and a 10-week virtual aftercare. It's actually like 100 hours of support, 100 hours of intensive work on your inner emotional barometer. And just so you know, Shift is fully aligned with the 12-step programs. It helps you get a sponsor, helps you plug into the 12-step world, helps you get the tools and things into practice that you need to. So this is the main thing that Shift does. If you want to jump into something earlier, next Sunday night, Amanda and I are teaching our course. This will be the 3rd time we're teaching it, called Want Food Freedom, or it's actually called Get Food Freedom Now. But if you want food freedom, we are doing a Sunday night course for the next 4 Sundays. And this is a steal. It's $99 for 4 Sunday evenings with the food plan and the tools and the plugging you into the 12-step world and some exposure to some group processing. This is like a starter course that you could just jump right into. And I'm assuming Karen's dropping things into the link as we into the chat, the links to different programs we have here. The last thing I will have, this is my very last slide. Everything you're looking for food addiction recovery that Shift offers is that it's literally at foodaddiction.com. It couldn't be easier. That's because Shift has been around so long that when the internet started, we got the best, we got the best food addiction name, foodaddiction.com. We do free 30-minute consults. If you want to talk further, I do most of them myself. We have Shift Strong meetings. The link is going to be in the chat there. It's all on foodaddiction.com, but you can come and actually just jump into these support meetings. They're not 12-step meetings. They're like fellowship meetings for the alumni. The Yale Food Addiction Scale is there. You could take that and find out if you classify. I mean, you did do an assessment tonight, but you can take another one and just confirm what you've learned tonight. We do coaching. Both Karen and I do coaching. We have counseling. Amanda and Gina do the deeper counseling work. Gina teaches meditation classes that are beautiful. Shift just has a lot to offer. Like food addiction is what Shift does. So if you want treatment for both parts of the disease, which is what you really want, come to foodaddiction.com. Oh, it looks like I missed 6 messages, but are these? All right. The intensive cost is the in-person intensive is like, I think $5,500, which really sounds like, holy cow, that's a lot of money. But remember, that's including the 10 weeks of aftercare. That includes your room and board. So honestly, if you were to do some therapy, I know you guys know it's probably like $100 to $200 an hour for a good therapist. If you take the 100 hours that you get of therapy and just to do the 5,500 divided by 100, that's like $55 an hour. I used to be a math teacher, by the way. And that's dirt cheap for awesome therapy. And that doesn't even include your room and board that you had in Florida. You know, you have to travel there yourself. So, and we do payment plans. We always try to make it possible for people to make it. It's a big deal. I know it is. But if you're sick and you have a disease, you need treatment. You need treatment. This is the top of the line treatment. You know, the 12-step world is free and accessible for anyone to go to. You can dive in the 12-step world. It gets tricky in OA sometimes. It gets tricky because many people in OA don't weigh and measure their food and don't quite understand food as a substance use disorder. They kind of think of it more as like a behavioral disorder. So it gets even tricky in the 12-step world. But there are places you can go where people weigh and measure. And yeah. Karen, do you want to add anything about the 12-step world? Because I know I go to
Yeah, it's interesting because I encountered OA in the part of the country where the programs are very structured. And so I never attended meetings that had moderate meal. A lot of people do moderate meals. I mean, Roseanne, who founded OA, started by just doing 3 meals a day, nothing in between. But she found that was unsustainable for her. And that's why the other branches of OA that recommended food plans happened. So yeah, you need to go to meetings and find one that works for you. There's a set of meetings called HOW meetings, HOW, and they're on the phone. They tend to have a weighed and measured food plan. Yes, so when you go on the OA sites and look at meetings, there is one called OA howphonemeetings.com, which has all the how ones. I'm not sure if there is a 90-day meeting, but yeah, you need to listen for the one that works for you if you're a low bottom food addict.
And this kind of goes back to like how Shift can help, because Shift really can help you navigate the 12-step road. I wish it was just so simple to just say, and I go to FA, which is Food Addicts and Recovery Anonymous, and everybody weighs and measures there. But sometimes FA people can be really over the top controlling. So even in FA, it's like, ooh, too over the top. I mean, it's so hard to find this balance of like a healthy, and that's where Shift can really help you navigate that. So, are there any other dates with the intensive? The next one will be in January, and that is a virtual intensive. They actually do them online where you're pretty much sitting on the computer all day, which saves money because it's cheaper because there's no room and board and no travel. It's not quite as fun to be on Zoom all day as it is to be in person, but it still works. We tried it during COVID times. And we had to try it because like everything was shut down. So we were like, well, let's give this Zoom thing a try, and it works. It does. It's just not quite as fun as being in person, of course. And so the next one after the November one will be in January. Someone asked, can you help an anorexic? And like I said before, the overlap between anorexia and food addiction, from what I've learned with the Yale scale, they tested people out that were anorexic, and like 50% of them were also food addicts. So if you're anorexic and food addicted, then yes, what we treat as food addiction. And if your anorexia is partially driven from food addiction, then yes, that is what we do. The fourth Sunday is Thanksgiving in Canada. Yeah, I don't know about Canada Thanksgiving, but that could, oh yeah, I think Amanda did mention that.
Mm-hmm.
If whoever was chatting about that is talking about the next 4 Sundays class, we are not recording those because those are like going to be a little bit more intimate, and they won't be recorded and posted. But yeah, sometimes we do have to just show up through things for our recovery. So I would encourage you, I definitely would encourage you, if you're thinking about getting started and not sure, and like, it's a very easy decision to get this $99 course for the next 4 Sundays. That's what we designed it for. It's like a beginner course. It's like, what do I want to do? Where do I go? So feel free to jump in. We hit the food plan right off the bat and get people up and running. It's kind of like a giant experiment of, will this work for you, and how do you feel while doing it? It's a giant experiment. So that's the course. That's called Get Food Freedom Now, and the link should be in the chat there. If you scroll up somewhere, Get Food Freedom Now. I see it. I'm gonna put it in there again. There it is. The food plan is not on the website. The problem with the food plan, we've gone back and forth about this so much. Everybody wants the food plan. They think that's going to be the answer. It's not the answer, right? So like, there's a billion food plans out there that you can do, but that's only half of the problem. You need to deal with the emotional barometer too. So we do give the food plan out in this Get Food Freedom Now course. And we do want to give people the food plan. We want you to do the food plan, but we want you to get the whole treatment. It's not a diet. It's not going to be another, oh, I'll just get this food plan and then I'll be fine. That's diet mentality. That's diet mentality. So we have to go deeper. Good question. And are we out of questions and out of time? It's been really lovely talking with everyone. You guys have been quite engaged, and it's been really nice to see.
I asked a question. This is Cynthia.
Oh, did I
Heather.
miss a question? Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. No. I'm just curious. I work with a nutritionist, and she's recommending chia seed pudding instead of oatmeal, because oatmeal's got a lot of different things that don't always work for me. So, are people using chia seeds on the program, or have you experimented with that?
Our particular food plan does not. You can go ahead, Karen. It doesn't have seeds on it at all, does it?
Right. I do know that in the starches category, you can use anything in there as a starch, and so some people use quinoa, and some people also
That's
use
protein, yep.
starchy vegetables instead of oatmeal. So they may have butternut squash as their starch at breakfast or something like that. But no, I have never heard of the seeds thing. We don't do the seeds thing.
Yeah.
I'll experiment myself then.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up nutritionists, because if nutritionists don't understand addiction, then even though they're recommending to you things that are about nutrition, with food addiction, we have to put our addiction eating needs before nutrition, because first of all, it doesn't matter if you're eating the most nutritious foods in the world. If they trigger you to binge, then you're eating a bunch of crap, right? So we really need like a structure around like our food plan. Like, actually, weirdly, the safety is in measuring things to the exact amount. I don't have to think about how much to eat. I just eat this exact number, and I never cheat. Because cheating would be for sure like that would be my addiction right there. So nutritionists don't quite understand how to structure their nutrition knowledge in a way that works for food addiction. So that's what we often find with that.
Yeah, like classical homeopath. But yes, definitely, I understand.
Yeah. We really need a lot more nutritionists who do understand food addiction, because they would be so invaluable if they really did. And I think some people are coming up. I know a few people in program who have just gotten trained to like functional medicine and different things. So, yep. Any other last questions? It's been really great meeting with all of you guys. I encourage you, when this link comes out, to share it around. I'm so passionate about the message getting out to the world. There is a solution to food addiction. It's real. It's a substance use disorder. It's not like a disease. It's actually a disease, and there really is treatment. But it's not just a diet. It's not just a food plan. And it's also not just therapy, not just 12-step work. It's both. We need both at the same time. This is critical for our recovery. And once you get both in place, and if you're willing and if you're honest, you can find yourself in recovery. And I'm telling you, my brain feels like a whole different brain, which is why I'm not a math teacher anymore, but I'm a food addiction coach, because I got all passionate about it because I love it. So any last second questions, or I will say goodbye to you all. Thank you so much, Karen, for joining me. Thank you all for coming. And please feel free to jump in and get a free consult with Shift, and we can talk further. All right. Goodbye, everybody.